The rain didn't fall like in the movies. It didn't dance, it didn't shimmer, and it certainly didn't cleanse. It fell hard, tired, and cold, the kind of rain that reminded you that life was mostly about surviving one wet day at a time. It soaked through the patched blue umbrella shielding Lucy, clung to her skin like unpaid bills, and dripped from the corners of her once white gown that now wore the shade of Lego soot. But still, she stood. By her roadside yam stand. Beside a charcoal grill. Beneath a stormy sky. Her swollen belly pressed outward beneath the damp fabric, a living testament to choices she couldn't undo and a man who disappeared like smoke in the rain. She adjusted the yams on the open grill with a rusted fork, her hands blackened by ash and fire. The scent of char and salt filled the air, a scent of survival, not comfort. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Hunger, she had learned, was not the worst thing to feel. Loneliness was. Across the flooded street, a sleek black SUV idled silently. Hidden behind tinted windows, Maxwell King, CEO of Kingcore Technologies, watched the woman under the umbrella with a gaze that hadn't blinked in 2 minutes. "Sir, you're 3 p.m. with the Lagos Development Board." "Push it. Push it, sir." "Yes, Tund. Push it." His voice was calm but final. Maxwell never lingered. Not in traffic. Not in boardrooms. And certainly not on flooded streets in front of yam cellars. But today, something anchored him here. Something about the woman, the stillness in her storm, reminded him of something long gone. Something he couldn't name. It wasn't pity he felt. It was recognition. He rolled the window down halfway. The aroma of roasted yam floated in and hit him like memory. His mother used to cook yam over charcoal in their little one-room apartment in Suralere before she died of kidney failure. That was back when he was Maxwell Nwosu. Not king, not a billionaire, not someone who got profiled in Forbes or whose phone rang every hour with investment pitches. Now, no one called to ask how he was doing. Only what he could do for them. Lucy saw the car again. 3rd time this week. Same model, same driver, same dark silhouette in the back seat. She looked away quickly and focused on brushing the yams with melted palm oil. She had learned long ago not to make eye contact with strangers in expensive cars. Curiosity had a price. But today, something tugged at her. She glanced up again. Their eyes met. Even at a distance, behind rain and glass, she felt the stare. Steady. Unflinching. She looked down and whispered to her belly. "Don't get any ideas, child. That man doesn't see us. He sees a story." 10 minutes later, the SUV door opened. Maxwell stepped out, umbrella in hand, the rain barely touching his suit. A black, double-breasted custom-tailored jacket. Italian leather shoes. The contrast between him and the muddy ground was almost laughable. Lucy stiffened. "I'll take one," he said, nodding to the grill. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her hands moved automatically, foil, yam, salt, oil. She handed it to him. 2,000 naira, she said. He paid in exact change. No tip. No flourish. Just as he turned to leave, he paused. "How long have you been doing this?" "Long enough," she replied without looking at him. "Your grill's leaning. One strong gust and it'll fall." "Let the wind try," she said quietly. He smiled slightly. Then turned and walked back into the car. Lucy exhaled. Inside the SUV, Maxwell opened the foil and took a bite. Smoke curled from the yam into the air. He chewed slowly. It wasn't gourmet. It was burnt at the edges. The salt was uneven. But it was real. "Tund," he said. "Yes, sir." "Find out who she is." "The yam seller?" "Yes." "Her name?" Where she lives. Everything. Tun didn't ask why. You didn't question a man like Maxwell. Not when he built empires from scratch and walked away from mergers because the air in the room was wrong. Back at the stand, Lucy tried to focus on the rest of her sales. But her mind refused. Who was that man? He wasn't like the others. Not the ones who offered to help her in exchange for disgusting favors. Not the ones who laughed at her belly or asked if she was keeping it. No, this man had looked at her like she was a person. The memory of that gaze sat heavy on her heart. As the rain slowed, she packed up slowly. Her belly was tight tonight. The baby kicked softly like a reminder. She hummed an old lullaby as she walked home barefoot, shoes soaked through. The streets of Lagos glimmered with wet reflections and forgotten dreams. 6 months ago, she had worn a white dress and held a strip of paper with a pink line on it. She had run to Ethan, breathless with joy. He had stared at it like it was a death sentence. You're keeping it? Of course. We made this together. My mother, my career. Lucy, you don't understand. Then make me understand. He left the next morning without goodbye. Left her with a growing belly and a rent bill she couldn't pay. When she called, his number had been disconnected. When she visited his home, his mother said coldly, "Your kind always look for a way up. You won't find it here." That night, after soaking yam earnings in a tin under her bed, Lucy lay on her thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. She didn't know why that man came to her stand. She didn't know why he bought yam. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. But for the first time in a long time, she smiled. Just a little. Not because anything had changed. But because maybe, one day, it could. The next morning, Maxwell woke to the sound of emails pinging and investors demanding updates. But he didn't open them. He opened his calendar. Cleared the next 3 days. He rolled up his sleeves, looked out at the rising sun over Ikoyi, and thought of a woman under a broken umbrella, turning yams. With ash on her fingers and grace in her soul. And he smiled. Let the world wait, he muttered. There's someone I need to see again. Maxwell King sat in his penthouse overlooking the Atlantic, a glass of untouched wine in one hand and silence clinging to every corner of the room. The walls were white. The floors were marble. The air smelled of lavender diffused by a silent machine he didn't remember buying. You work too much, his mother used to say. What's the point of being rich if you're never home to enjoy it? Now he was home. Alone. With millions in his account and no one to ask him how his day went. But there was her. The yam seller. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she stood, soaked, still, unshaken. There was a dignity in her defiance that no corporate suit or private jet had ever shown him. 3 days had passed. 3 days, 3 unspoken drive-bys. Every afternoon around 5, he'd passed the same street where the woman, Lucy, his assistant had learned. Roasted yam under a slanted umbrella. She never looked up anymore. Maybe she thought he had been a fluke. But she was wrong. Maxwell wasn't sure what pulled him back. He had dates with models and dinners with diplomats on his calendar, but none of them made him turn his head like Lucy. Tund, his loyal assistant, finally spoke what everyone around Maxwell had been thinking. Sir, is this an obsession, or a project? Maxwell didn't look at him. She's neither. She's a reminder. Of what? Of something real. Lucy noticed the car every day now, but she refused to care. She couldn't afford to. The last man she let close had left her with stretch marks, a baby, and a broken lease. Still, every time she heard an engine idle for too long, her chest tightened. He's just another rich man with a savior complex, she told herself. They come. They stare. Then they go. But still, she fixed her head wrap better each day. Wiped her stall earlier. Smiled at customers she used to ignore. She wasn't waiting. She was preparing. It was the fourth day when he spoke again. Maxwell stepped out of the car, no umbrella this time, letting the drizzle kiss his suit. Lucy glanced up, annoyed. Yam again? Not today. Then. I want to ask you a question. She looked away. I'm not looking for a story. Or pity. What if I'm not offering either? Then what are you offering? He paused. Time. She blinked. The rain filled the silence. Do you want to sit? She asked, motioning to an old wooden stool by the stand. Only if you sit too. I don't sit with strangers. Then let's not be strangers. And just like that, the wall cracked. They spoke. About nothing. About everything. She told him about yam prices, how rain affected the firewood, and how every man who claimed to care had left when things got real. He told her about boardrooms, greed, and how he hadn't tasted anything as good as her burnt yam in a decade. Why do you come back? She finally asked. Because you remind me that I used to want more than money. And what do you want now? To remember who I was before the world gave me titles. By the next morning, the street knew. The yam seller was talking to a man in a black suit. He came every day. Sometimes stayed. Talked. Ate. Whispers turned to smirks. She's playing smart. Trying to trap him. Classic hustle. Lucy heard it. Felt it. But for the first time in months, she didn't flinch. Let them talk. Let them assume. They didn't know that he hadn't touched her hand once. That the only thing he gave her was time, and in return, she gave him honesty, something he hadn't bought before. At the office, Maxwell was less focused. His board noticed. Investors asked questions. He didn't care. Tun gave updates. She lives in a one-room apartment. No power. She's behind on rent. Refuses aid. Very private. Maxwell sat back, troubled. How do you help someone without insulting their pride? He asked. You don't help them. You respect them. And what if I want both? On a dry Thursday evening, Lucy shared something raw. My name is Lucy Akand. I was going to be a caterer. I had dreams. They didn't disappear. They just waited. And now? Now, I roast yam to survive. And talk to men in black cars who don't belong here. Maybe I belong where I feel seen, Maxwell replied. That night, he left her with a simple sentence. If you let me, I'll show you what your dreams still look like. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. The next day, he didn't come. And Lucy felt it. More than she expected to. She stood by her stand, fingers twitching at the silence. That's when a small black envelope arrived. Inside, a card. I haven't disappeared. Just making room in my world for someone who matters. M. She smiled. For real this time. Maxwell stood at a construction site where he was building a new community center. One room would be named Lucy's Kitchen. Another. Hope Room. Back at her stand, Lucy watched the rain return, but this time, she didn't feel cold. Because she knew. He'd be back. Not to save her, but to walk with her. The sun had yet to rise when Maxwell left his penthouse again, his mind busy with business and her, Lucy, the woman who had become the most important part of his day without either of them realizing it. He couldn't focus at work, his thoughts wandered back to the smell of roasted yam and the way her eyes met his without fear, without shame. She was everything the world told him he couldn't have, yet everything he now wanted. But as much as he felt this pull, his world was not built for her. His world was built for elite deals, not open flames. Boardrooms, not roadside stands. Wealth, not survival. Still, he could not ignore the tug. The need to see her again. Lucy's life had become a strange rhythm: wake, cook, sell, and survive. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to feel special, to be seen for more than just the woman selling food on the side of the road. But Maxwell's visit, his notes, his words, they haunted her. She couldn't help but wonder if he was just another man offering empty promises or if he truly saw her. The card he had left her sat on her small wooden table, tucked inside a corner of the room where the light never quite reached. Her eyes had memorized the message, but something inside her didn't want to admit how deeply it had affected her. She had seen men come and go, promising things, offering help that felt like a bribe to get something from her. But Maxwell's words weren't like that. There was no arrogance, no hidden agenda. Just kindness. Later that day, Lucy set up her stand as usual, not expecting anything different. The rain had cleared, but the air still felt heavy, almost pregnant with possibility. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what Maxwell might bring, but she had learned to take things one step at a time. She glanced up and froze. There he was, Maxwell, stepping out of his black SUV. He was always impeccably dressed, even more so than before. But today, there was a difference in his stride. He was determined. He was coming for something. Lucy felt her heart skip. She kept her eyes on the grill, pretending to busy herself with the yam, as if the whole world wasn't watching this simple moment unfold. Maxwell approached, his gaze soft yet intense. His hands were empty this time, his usual air of business replaced by something more vulnerable. "Lucy," he said softly, his voice steady but warm, "I'd like to talk, if you'll allow me." Her response was a beat of silence. The rain had passed, but the storm between them had only just begun. She looked up from the grill, meeting his eyes. "I don't need your pity," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "I'm not here to pity you," Maxwell replied, his voice steady. "I'm here because I want to know who you are beyond this stand. I want to understand what drives you." Lucy hesitated. No one had ever asked her that before. Not truly. "What's there to understand?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "I sell yam. I live. That's it." "Is that all? What else is there? People like you look down at people like me, then wonder why we can't smile like we have everything figured out." Maxwell wasn't prepared for that response. His face softened, a moment of understanding flickering in his eyes. "I'm sorry if I've made you feel that way," he said. "That wasn't my intention. He paused, searching for the right words. "I want to be more than a man passing by your stand. I want to make a difference in your life, if you'll let me." Lucy laughed softly, the sound surprising both of them. "You don't understand, do you? A difference in my life, that would mean you changing everything. And no one does that." Maxwell's expression turned serious. "Then let me show you how someone can." The days that followed were marked by tension. Maxwell kept visiting her, sometimes bringing her small gifts, other times just sitting with her in silence, watching the world pass by. He was careful not to cross any boundaries but was always there, a constant presence she hadn't anticipated. But Lucy's world was not built for this. She didn't know how to navigate a man who truly wanted nothing but her company. She couldn't afford to fall for someone like him. A billionaire. He lived in a world where a woman like her didn't belong. At the same time, Maxwell found himself torn. He had a legacy to uphold, a company to run. But this feeling, this thing growing between them, it made him question everything. Could he truly change his life for a woman like Lucy? Could he leave behind the world he knew? As much as they were drawn to each other, they were pulled apart by forces neither of them could control. One evening, Maxwell surprised her with an invitation. "Come to dinner with me, Lucy. I want to take you to a place you've never been before." Her first instinct was to refuse. "I don't belong in places like that. That's exactly why I want you there." But Lucy hesitated. Could she do it? Could she walk into a world that wasn't hers? Could she risk everything she had fought for? In the end, she agreed, but her heart raced with fear. She would be stepping into a world of high society, a world that could either accept her or shun her. And if it was the latter, would she ever be able to go back to her simple, humble life? The night of the gala came, and Lucy stood before a mirror in a modest dress, feeling like an imposter. She had never been to a place like this before, sparkling chandeliers, crystal glasses, and faces all carefully crafted for the public eye. But Maxwell was there, waiting for her. He greeted her with a smile, his arm around her waist. "You look stunning," he whispered. "I feel like a fish out of water," she confessed. "Then let me be your anchor," he said. As they entered the gala, heads turned. She was out of place, or so she thought. But Maxwell kept her close, his world seemingly fading as he focused entirely on her. And for a brief moment, she felt like the most important person in the room. But then, the whispers began. It was inevitable. "Who's this? Where did he find her?" Lucy felt her stomach drop. The tension between her and Maxwell had never felt more real. Was this really a life she could live? Would she ever fit in his world? Or was she destined to be a passing story, a fleeting connection in his perfect, well-ordered life? As the evening wore on, Maxwell led her outside to the terrace, where the city's lights flickered below. "What's wrong?" he asked. "This isn't me. I'm not one of them. I never wanted you to be one of them." "Then what do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I want you. All of you. I want to share my world with you, but I want to respect yours." Lucy stood there, torn. Her heart told her to step forward. Her mind told her to step back. The two worlds had collided, and only one question remained: could love bridge the gap between them? The morning after the gala was quiet, almost unbearably so. Maxwell had stayed with Lucy until the last guest had left, then they had walked back to the car, her hand in his, but her mind far away. In the shimmering lights of the event, she had felt like a stranger in a world that wasn't hers. The whispers, the stares, they haunted her all the way back to the quiet of her room. She sat on the edge of her thin mattress, the weight of the night still pressing on her chest. What was I doing there? She had felt the weight of judgment, like the eyes of the world had followed her into the ballroom and never let her go. Maxwell had noticed, of course. He had reassured her, touched her arm, and told her it didn't matter. But it did matter. She wasn't the woman for that world. She had to remind herself of that every time he looked at her like she could belong. But the problem wasn't his world. It was hers. And she wasn't sure she could live in it forever, with him. The rumors about Maxwell and Lucy spread like wildfire through the streets. Gossip travels fast in Lagos, and nothing attracts more attention than an unlikely couple. A billionaire businessman, and the pregnant woman selling roasted yam by the roadside. It was a story people couldn't resist. One afternoon, as Lucy sat tending to her grill, a group of women walked past her stall, their voices just loud enough for her to hear. "Did you hear about the yam seller and the billionaire? She thinks she's going to marry him. Isn't she a little too rough for someone like him? She's got a baby. What does he want with her?" The word stung like a slap, but Lucy held her head high, pretending not to care. Let them talk, she thought. Let them say what they want. It doesn't change anything. But deep down, the gossip hurt more than she expected. She had always kept her pride intact, but hearing strangers tear her down like that made her feel small. Maxwell had warned her that people would talk. But he didn't understand. He couldn't possibly understand what it was like to live every day with the weight of the world's judgment. Later that evening, Maxwell showed up at her stall again. The car rolled to a stop just like always, but this time, there was an urgency in his eyes. "Lucy, we need to talk," he said, his tone sharp. He didn't wait for her response but walked over and stood beside her. Lucy looked up at him, her hand still on the grill, but the fire inside her was burning bright. "I don't think I have anything left to say to you," she replied coldly. "I've heard enough." Maxwell paused, surprised by her tone. He had never seen her so distant, so closed off. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Don't let them get to you. I've told you, I'm not here because of the gossip. I'm here because of you." Lucy turned her back to him, her voice trembling slightly. "You say that, but can you really understand what it's like to be me? To hear people say I'm not enough just because I'm not wearing a suit, or living in a mansion. Can you understand that?" Maxwell's heart tightened at the pain in her voice. "I do understand. I may not know exactly how it feels, but I know what it's like to have people judge you for who you are. I've spent my life being judged, misunderstood." Lucy shook her head, not convinced. "But they don't know you. They don't know you the way I do." There was a long pause. Lucy's words hung in the air like a weight neither of them could lift. Maxwell's eyes softened as he took a step back, feeling the distance between them widen. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to make this harder for you." Lucy finally turned to face him. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears. "You don't get it. This is too much. I'm not like the women you know, Maxwell. I'm not like them." Maxwell reached out, gently cupping her chin in his hand. "You don't have to be like them. You're you. And that's all I need." But Lucy pulled away, her chest tight. "But I'm not enough. I'm just a woman who sells yam. Nothing more, nothing less." The hurt in her voice broke Maxwell's heart. "You are more than enough, Lucy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I need you to believe that." But Lucy didn't know how to. And so, as always, she turned away. "I can't do this. Not now. Not ever." Maxwell stood there, watching her retreat into the shadows of the evening, knowing she was slipping farther from him with every step. The following days were a blur. Lucy couldn't get the words Maxwell had said out of her head, "You're more than enough," but they felt hollow. She couldn't see herself that way. She couldn't believe in a world where she belonged with someone like him. Maxwell, on the other hand, was growing restless. His meetings and business deals no longer held his attention. He missed her, in ways he hadn't expected. She had become a part of him, and he couldn't ignore it. He couldn't let her slip away. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe it wasn't just about him convincing her. It was about her convincing herself that she was worth the love he had to offer. One rainy afternoon, he drove to the stand again, unsure of what to say. But this time, when he reached the stand, he didn't see Lucy. Her grill was empty, the street was quiet. His heart sank. Maxwell took a deep breath and decided to find her. He knew it wasn't enough to just show up, it was time to make a choice. Hours later, he found her. Lucy was at the small apartment she had been staying in, sitting by the window, staring out into the rainy night. Maxwell knocked softly before entering, and when Lucy saw him, she didn't say a word. He stood at the door, his heart racing. "I'm not leaving until you listen to me, Lucy," he said. Her eyes were red, and her face was weary. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice small. "I want you to understand that I'm here. For you. For us." But Lucy just shook her head. "I don't belong in your world, Maxwell. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to." Maxwell took a deep breath, then stepped forward. "Then let me show you how much you belong in mine." The rain had stopped, but the air in Lagos was still thick with humidity and possibility. Maxwell stood outside Lucy's small apartment, his hand resting on the frame of the door. His heart pounded in his chest, unsure if it was from the tension in the air or the hope that Lucy would finally open her heart to him. He had spent the last few days giving her space, allowing her to process the decision he had left her with. But now, standing at her door, he realized how much he had come to rely on her. The thought of walking away from her, was unbearable. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a reminder for another meeting, another business deal that needed his attention. He silenced the phone, unable to focus on anything other than Lucy. Inside, Lucy sat in her modest room, the note from Maxwell still crumpled in her hands. She hadn't yet made up her mind, but deep down, she knew that something had shifted in her. She had spent so many years surviving, trying to protect herself from the world and from men like him. But now, something in her was telling her to take a leap, to trust him, even if it meant leaving behind everything she knew. But could she truly belong in his world? Would she lose herself in the process? The moment she opened the door, Maxwell could see the doubt in her eyes, but there was something else too, something softer. She stepped aside to let him in, her gaze not quite meeting his. "Lucy," he said softly, his voice filled with both urgency and tenderness. "I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever. I want to help you. I want to be with you. If you'll let me." Her heart raced as she looked at him. He was standing there, the man she had spent days trying to convince herself wasn't a part of her life, and yet here he was, waiting. "I don't know if I can do this," Lucy whispered. "I don't know if I belong in your world, Maxwell." Maxwell's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand, his voice gentle. "You belong with me because of who you are, not because of where you're from. I don't care about your past, Lucy. I care about you. You don't have to change anything to be with me." Tears welled in her eyes as she let his words sink in. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not just as the pregnant woman struggling to survive, but as a person worthy of love. Later that evening, Maxwell drove Lucy to a quiet part of the city, far from the chaotic streets where she sold her yams. The luxurious car felt almost foreign to her, but Maxwell's presence was a steady anchor. He had taken her to a modest, quiet house on the outskirts of Lagos. It was small, but the air in the house felt different, calm, peaceful. "What is this place?" Lucy asked, her voice full of curiosity. Maxwell smiled. "This is for you. I've been working on this project for a while. It's a women's shelter. A place where women like you, strong, resilient women who need a fresh start, can have a safe space to breathe. To rebuild." Lucy stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the gesture. This was more than just a house, it was a symbol of the change he wanted for her. It was a future, one she wasn't sure she could reach. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her emotions taking over. Maxwell stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to say anything right now. You just need to know that you are worth everything. And I'll be here every step of the way." The warmth of his words settled in her chest, but the uncertainty didn't fully fade. She was afraid of what would happen if she took this leap. She didn't know how to trust herself, or him. But in that moment, she realized that the only way forward was to trust the possibility. Over the next few weeks, Lucy began to find her rhythm in the new space. Maxwell had kept his word, he didn't try to rush her into anything. Instead, he provided her with the space she needed to heal, to grow, and to explore the idea of what life could look like outside of the street she had known for so long. She started to rebuild her dreams, not just for herself, but for the child growing inside her. She attended cooking classes, learned about small business management, and began to plan how she could one day open her own restaurant, just as she had dreamed of doing before everything had fallen apart. Maxwell was there, in the background, always supportive, but never pushing. He watched as she flourished, but he never tried to change her. His love for her wasn't about ownership or control, it was about freedom, the freedom for her to become the person she was meant to be. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of her new house, Lucy finally turned to Maxwell, her heart full of the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. "Maxwell," she began, her voice steady. "I was scared. Scared that I wouldn't fit into your world. Scared that I would lose myself in the process. But now, I see that this, us, isn't about fitting in. It's about being who we are and loving each other for it." Maxwell's smile was soft, and he gently took her hand. "I told you. You belong with me because of who you are, not who you think you have to be. You are perfect just the way you are." Lucy's heart soared as she finally understood what love could be. It wasn't about perfection or fitting into someone else's mold. It was about two people accepting each other, flaws and all, and building a life together from there. And in that moment, Lucy realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Maxwell had kept his promise. He had given her space, not pushing her into anything, but always there when she needed him. And now, weeks after that difficult conversation on the doorstep, Lucy stood at the threshold of a new world. The women's shelter Maxwell had created was a refuge, a place that welcomed her without judgment, a place that allowed her to breathe and start over. The walls of her apartment now felt distant, like a past life that no longer belonged to her. The mornings were different. She woke up earlier, not out of necessity, but out of hope. The days were filled with small victories, a cooking class here, a financial planning session there. She felt the world changing around her, shifting in ways she never thought possible. She felt alive again. Maxwell had offered her more than just material help. He had given her a chance to rediscover herself, to find her voice, her dreams. She no longer saw herself as just a woman who had to survive. She was a woman with options, with choices, with a future she could shape on her own terms. But even as she embraced the change, she couldn't escape the guilt that gnawed at her. She was grateful for Maxwell, for everything he had done for her, but there were still moments when she felt like she was drifting between two worlds, the one she knew and the one he had introduced her to. One evening, as she sat on the small porch of the shelter, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lucy felt the familiar ache of uncertainty creep back in. She had come so far, yet part of her still clung to the life she had known. The yam stand, the rain-soaked streets, the struggle. All of it had been a part of her. Would she ever truly be free of that identity? The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to see Maxwell walking toward her, a warm smile on his face. The worry lines on his forehead had softened in recent weeks, his concern for her slowly easing as he saw her grow. "You look pensive," he said, sitting down beside her. "What's on your mind?" Lucy hesitated, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know if I belong here, Maxwell. This place, this life, it feels so different from everything I've known. It's like I'm forgetting who I am." Maxwell reached for her hand, gently squeezing it. "Lucy, you don't have to forget who you are. You don't have to leave your past behind to move forward. Your past made you strong, but your future is where you'll find your true power." Lucy turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of doubt and longing. "But what if I can't fit in this world? What if I'm not cut out for it?" Maxwell smiled softly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You are cut out for it. You have everything you need inside you already. All you have to do is believe that you're worthy of everything you want." Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she didn't feel like an imposter in his world. Maxwell had always seen her as more than just a survivor, he saw her as someone capable of greatness. Maybe, just maybe, she could learn to see herself that way too. In the weeks that followed, Lucy threw herself into the work she loved. Cooking. It was something that had always been her passion, and now, thanks to the resources Maxwell had provided, she was finally able to focus on honing her craft. She enrolled in a culinary school, where she learned everything from fine dining techniques to business management. Her dreams of opening her own restaurant didn't seem as impossible anymore. One afternoon, Maxwell picked her up after a class, his SUV pulling up in front of the shelter with a wide grin on his face. He was holding a small box wrapped in gold paper. "What's this?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. He handed her the box, his smile never fading. "Open it." Lucy carefully unwrapped the box, revealing a set of high-quality chef's knives, gleaming and sharp. She gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Maxwell, this is too much." "No," he said, his voice serious. "It's just the beginning." She looked up at him, her heart swelling. He had done so much for her already, and now this, a tool that would help her achieve her dreams. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Maxwell took her hand, his expression tender. "You don't have to thank me. Just keep believing in yourself, Lucy. That's all I want." For the first time, Lucy didn't feel out of place. She felt like she had a purpose, not just in Maxwell's world, but in her own. Months later, after much hard work and dedication, Lucy's dream came true. She had opened her own small restaurant, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It wasn't much yet, but it was hers. The walls were lined with photos of her grandmother's kitchen, a tribute to where her love for food had started. The air was filled with the scent of sizzling jollof rice and grilled fish, the heartbeat of her heritage. Maxwell stood by her side, beaming with pride as they prepared for the grand opening. He had helped fund the restaurant, but it was Lucy's passion and hard work that had brought it to life. "You did it," Maxwell said, his voice full of awe. Lucy smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "We did it. Together." That night, the restaurant was filled with laughter and chatter. Lucy had brought people together through her food, and she knew this was only the beginning. Her life was no longer about survival, it was about living, truly living, with the people she loved by her side. Maxwell was there, not as her savior, but as her partner, her equal. Together, they had created something beautiful. And for the first time, Lucy felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the months passed, Lucy's restaurant flourished, and her relationship with Maxwell grew stronger. They weren't just partners in business, they were partners in life. Lucy had found a new sense of independence, but she also knew she could rely on Maxwell for support, just as he had always been there for her. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the streets of Lagos, Lucy couldn't help but smile. "You've changed my life, Maxwell," she said softly. He squeezed her hand. "You changed your own life, Lucy. I just helped you see it." And for the first time, Lucy believed him. It was a quiet afternoon when Lucy first saw him again. She had just finished preparing a fresh batch of her signature grilled yams for the restaurant's afternoon rush. The sun was still high, casting a warm glow over the bustling street outside. The restaurant was busy, and Lucy was lost in her work, overseeing her staff and greeting customers. Then, the door opened. Lucy looked up, and there he stood, Ethan. The man who had once promised her forever. The man who had walked away when she needed him most. Her stomach tightened as his familiar face, now older and wearier, filled the doorway. Maxwell was behind the counter, attending to an order. He glanced up briefly but didn't notice the man standing in the doorway, nor the way Lucy's face drained of color. Ethan hesitated, taking in the sight of her. She had changed. She was stronger, more confident. Her belly, now unmistakably pregnant, added a layer of complexity to the encounter. She stood frozen, the weight of their past hanging heavily in the air. "Lucy," Ethan said, his voice low, apologetic. "I didn't expect to find you here. But I needed to see you." Maxwell was busy in the kitchen when Lucy walked over to the door. Her steps were heavy, and as she reached for the handle, her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe this was happening. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. As she opened the door, she was met with Ethan's apologetic gaze. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold, betraying none of the emotions that churned within her. Ethan stepped inside, looking around the restaurant with a faint sense of nostalgia. I've been looking for you. I know I don't have the right to show up like this, but I needed to see you. To apologize." Lucy crossed her arms, her mind racing. She could feel the old wounds reopening, but she refused to let him see her pain. She had built a new life, a life that had meaning. "Apologize?" she scoffed. "Do you think an apology is enough? After everything you did? You left me. You abandoned me when I needed you most." Ethan took a step closer, his face full of regret. "I was wrong. I know that. I was scared, Lucy. But I've realized now that I made a huge mistake. I thought I could come back and fix things, and maybe it's too late, but I wanted to try." Lucy's jaw tightened. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. This wasn't the man she once knew. This wasn't the person she had loved. He had left her with nothing but her broken dreams. "You can't fix it, Ethan. You don't get to come back into my life after everything that happened." She turned away, walking toward the counter where Maxwell had been working. The last thing she needed now was to open old wounds. Maxwell had noticed Lucy's tense body language from across the room. As she turned her back on Ethan, Maxwell's gaze flickered toward the door. He saw the man standing there, and instantly, the air around them shifted. Maxwell approached, his presence commanding. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, waiting for Ethan to speak. Ethan hesitated but then looked at Maxwell, offering an awkward smile. I didn't mean to cause any trouble," he said. "I just needed to see Lucy. To make things right." Maxwell crossed his arms, his voice steady but firm. "You had your chance, and you walked away. You're not welcome here." Lucy turned back, her face a mixture of frustration and relief at Maxwell's protective stance. She couldn't deny the way his words calmed her, the way he stood by her, just as he always had. Ethan had been a part of her past, but Maxwell was her future. Ethan opened his mouth as if to argue, but Lucy cut him off. "You don't get to come back into my life," she said firmly. "Not now. Not ever." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Ethan glanced between the two of them, his expression one of defeat. It was clear that he had hoped for forgiveness, for a second chance. But Lucy wasn't the same woman she had been when he left her. She had grown stronger, and in that strength, she had found a love that was real, a love that Ethan could never offer her. Maxwell placed a hand on Lucy's shoulder, silently supporting her. After a moment, Ethan sighed and turned to leave. I wanted to apologize. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd give me a chance to fix things." But Lucy didn't say anything more. She watched him walk out the door, the weight of the past lifting off her shoulders with each step he took. The restaurant was quiet for a few moments after Ethan left. Lucy stood there, her chest rising and falling with the weight of what had just happened. Maxwell walked over to her, placing his hand gently on her back. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "You don't owe him anything, Lucy." She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I thought I would never be free of him," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "But now I feel free. I've let go of the past. And now, I can finally move forward." Maxwell held her tighter, his heart swelling with love and pride. "And we'll move forward together." The days after Ethan's visit were filled with reflection for Lucy. She had faced her past head-on and had come out stronger on the other side. The wounds that once felt fresh were now healed, and she knew that she was ready to embrace her future fully. Maxwell continued to support her, offering both his love and guidance as they worked side by side on the restaurant. Together, they had built something beautiful, not just a business, but a life they were both proud of. Lucy knew that no matter what came next, she had finally found the strength to leave the past behind. And with Maxwell by her side, she was ready for whatever came their way. The weeks following the opening of the restaurant were filled with triumph. Lucy had transformed her dream into a reality. The restaurant was thriving, her culinary skills earning rave reviews, and the community around her was supportive. Maxwell stood beside her, not just as her partner in business but as a constant source of emotional support. He had helped her build this life, a life that was no longer about surviving but truly living. But even amidst all the success, Lucy felt an undercurrent of doubt. Her past, while behind her, was still a part of her. It haunted her in moments of quiet. She knew that with every step forward, there were parts of herself she had to leave behind. She couldn't keep holding on to everything, not the struggles, not the pain. Not even Ethan. Maxwell was patient with her. He never pushed her. But as their relationship deepened, the pressure of what comes next weighed heavily on Lucy. She had never imagined a life like this, with someone like Maxwell. And yet, the more she experienced this new life, the more uncertain she became. Was she truly ready to commit? Was she capable of fully embracing the life he had given her? Maxwell, too, had his moments of doubt. He was deeply in love with Lucy. But his world, a world of high-powered deals and the spotlight, was vastly different from hers. He watched her grow stronger each day, but he wondered whether he was enough for her. Whether, in the long run, he could truly be the partner she needed. One evening, as they sat together in her office, he couldn't hold his thoughts back anymore. "Lucy," he started, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I'm afraid you'll outgrow me." Lucy looked up from her paperwork, her eyes filled with concern. "Outgrow you?" she asked, her heart racing. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant as if he were looking at something only he could see. "I've watched you transform. I see your potential, your passion. But sometimes I wonder if I'm holding you back." Lucy shook her head, moving closer to him. "Maxwell, don't you see? You didn't hold me back. You've made me believe in myself again. I wouldn't have gotten this far without you." Maxwell smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I've given you everything I can, Lucy. But the one thing I'm afraid of, is you wanting more than I can give. That one day, you'll realize you deserve more, someone who can give you everything." Her heart ached at his words. She had never imagined him feeling so vulnerable, so insecure. He had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. And yet, in that moment, Lucy saw a side of him she had never seen before, a side that feared losing her, just as much as she feared losing him. The tension between them continued to grow, but it was unspoken. They both struggled with their feelings, unsure of how to bridge the gap that was slowly widening between them. Lucy wasn't sure what the next step was. She had a vision for her future, but did that future include Maxwell? Or was it a future where she had to go it alone, following her dreams without the baggage of their past? It wasn't until one quiet afternoon, when she was preparing for a busy dinner shift, that everything clicked. Maxwell was waiting in the corner of the restaurant, his eyes on her. She could see the concern etched in his features. For the first time, she truly understood what he had been feeling. He had given so much of himself to her, and yet, he feared she would outgrow him. But the truth was, Lucy didn't want to outgrow him. She wanted to grow with him. That was when it hit her. Lucy walked over to him, her hands trembling as she placed them on his. "Maxwell," she said softly, "I've spent so much time wondering if I'm enough for you. But I think the real question is, are you enough for me?" Maxwell looked at her in confusion, his brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" She smiled, a slow, understanding smile that came from a place of deep clarity. "I've always thought I had to prove something, to you, to everyone. But I've realized that I'm enough. I don't need to be anyone else, and I don't need anyone else to validate me. But what I do need is you. I want you, exactly as you are. Maxwell's expression softened, his heart swelling with emotion. And I want you, Lucy. With all my heart. The next few days were filled with an air of calm. Lucy finally let go of her doubts and fears. She had spent so long trying to protect herself, trying to avoid the pain of loss. But now, she realized that love wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about embracing it, accepting it, and still choosing to move forward. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of the restaurant, Maxwell took her hand and spoke with a certainty that matched hers. Lucy, I want to build a life with you. A life that's real. No more hiding. No more wondering if we're enough. Just us, together. Can you do that with me? Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. Yes. I'm ready. For everything. Maxwell leaned in, his meeting hers in a way that sealed their promises. In that moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, no past, no fears, no doubts. Just love, pure and simple. Days turned into weeks, and the restaurant continued to thrive. Lucy and Maxwell found their rhythm, not just as business partners, but as partners in life. They worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with every passing day. Lucy's dreams of expanding her culinary ventures began to take shape. With Maxwell's unwavering support, she opened a second restaurant, focusing on food that told stories, food that celebrated culture, love, and resilience. And this time, she was doing it on her terms. Maxwell had finally accepted that he didn't have to be the one to fix her. He just had to love her, and that was more than enough. Together, they created a future where they could build, grow, and love freely. And in the end, Lucy realized that the greatest choice she had made wasn't about choosing Maxwell or her dreams. It was about choosing herself, and in doing so, choosing the love that would carry her forward. The restaurant was doing better than Lucy had ever imagined. Maxwell had become not only her business partner but also a constant source of emotional support. Their bond had grown, and so had their trust in each other. The restaurant was thriving, the customers were loyal, and Lucy was finally able to relax a little, no longer consumed by the daily struggles of survival. But as much as the business flourished, a part of Lucy still wondered what would happen when the storm came. And she knew it would come. After all, nothing in life ever stays perfect forever. One morning, as the sky began to darken with clouds, Lucy sat by the restaurant window, gazing out at the streets. The rain started to fall, gentle at first, then heavier, until it blurred everything beyond the glass. She could feel it, the familiar weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. Maxwell had been unusually quiet that morning. He had left for an urgent meeting, but Lucy knew there was something on his mind. Later that afternoon, as Lucy was preparing new recipes in the kitchen, her phone rang. It was Maxwell. Lucy, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you meet me at the office later today? His voice was calm, but Lucy could sense the tension behind his words. Her heart skipped a beat. She had learned to read the subtle shifts in Maxwell's demeanor, and this wasn't good. Of course. What's going on? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. There was a long pause before he answered. I'll explain when I see you. Just meet me at the office, okay? Maxwell's sudden change in tone unsettled her, and she couldn't help but feel a tight knot form in her stomach. That evening, Lucy arrived at Maxwell's office, her mind racing with questions. She walked through the glass doors to find Maxwell sitting at his desk, looking even more tense than before. His suit was immaculate, but the strain in his face was palpable. Maxwell, what's going on? Lucy asked, her voice laced with concern as she stood in front of his desk. Maxwell looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and something else, something she couldn't quite place. Lucy, he began, his voice low and measured, I need you to listen carefully. The company has received an offer to merge with another corporation. It's a huge opportunity, one that could secure our future. But there's a catch. Lucy felt the weight of his words settle in the pit of her stomach. What kind of catch? Maxwell paused, as if struggling to find the right words. The merger would require me to step into a bigger role, a role that will take up a lot of my time. I'll be traveling a lot, working long hours. I'm not sure how much I can be there for you and the restaurant. Lucy's heart sank. She had worked so hard to build this life, and the thought of Maxwell being pulled away from her was unbearable. So, you're saying you have to choose between me and your business? She asked, her voice shaking. Maxwell's expression softened. No, I'm not choosing between you and my business. I just don't know how I can balance both. And I need you to understand that. Lucy felt a mix of frustration and fear. She had just started to feel settled in their life together. She couldn't lose him again, not like this. I don't know if I can do this, Maxwell. I don't want you to disappear again. I've been through so much already, and now you're telling me you might be gone all the time. Maxwell stood and walked over to her, gently taking her hands. Lucy, I love you. And I want to be here for you. But I need you to trust me. Trust that I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. I'll make sure you're never alone. The next few days were filled with tension. Maxwell became more consumed with work, spending long hours in meetings and conference calls. Lucy did her best to hold the restaurant together, but she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. Every time she reached for him, he seemed to slip away. One evening, after closing the restaurant, Lucy sat alone in the quiet kitchen, the sound of the rain tapping against the windows. She had been so sure of their future, so confident that they could overcome anything. But now, she wasn't so sure. Was she strong enough to handle this? Could she keep going while Maxwell fought his battles at work? Or would the distance tear them apart? The familiar weight of uncertainty pressed on her chest again. She closed her eyes, wishing for the simplicity of the past, when things were uncertain but still within her. Control. But then, as she stood up to leave, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Maxwell. His face was tired, but there was a softness in his eyes that she hadn't seen in days. Lucy, he said softly, I know I've been distant. But I don't want you to feel alone. This isn't just my fight, it's ours. I need you. And I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't important. Lucy turned around, meeting his gaze. I don't want you to disappear again, Maxwell. I want to build a life with you, but I need to know you're all in. Not just in the restaurant, but in this relationship. In us. Maxwell pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I am all in, Lucy. I promise. This is our life. And I'll do whatever it takes to make it work. We'll figure this out together. Over the next few weeks, Maxwell worked tirelessly to balance his career with his life at the restaurant. It wasn't easy, but he was determined to make it work. He spent more time with Lucy, coming home early, taking calls after hours, and making sure she knew that no matter how busy his life got, she would always be his priority. The storm that had threatened to tear them apart began to clear. Lucy's doubts slowly faded, replaced with a renewed sense of trust. They had learned that their love was strong enough to weather the toughest of storms. And as the rain cleared outside, Lucy and Maxwell sat together, planning the future, not just as business partners, but as a team, ready to face whatever life threw at them. The rain had long passed. Now, the sunlight spilled onto the clean glass of the newly renovated storefront, casting a golden glow across the name written in bold, hand-painted letters, More Than Yam. Lucy stood outside the restaurant with one hand on her rounded belly, the other holding Maxwell's. She had chosen the name herself. A phrase that had echoed in her soul from the first time Maxwell looked at her not as a street vendor, but as someone worth seeing. Customers were already lining up. Locals. Journalists. Tourists who had heard whispers of the pregnant woman who once sold yams under the rain and now ran the most sought-after restaurant in the city. But for Lucy, it was never about the hype. It was about becoming whole. Inside, the scent of roasted plantain, fried yam, and spicy pepper sauce drifted through the kitchen. Lucy moved like a gentle current, graceful but firm, guiding her small staff with kindness and clarity. Her recipes, once improvised in the rain, now graced glossy menus. Each dish had a name, a story, and a connection to her roots. Her signature, Rain Grill, a charcoal roasted yam dish glazed in palm oil and smoky atta din din, had become the heart of the menu. Maxwell peeked in from the office, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "They're already calling to book tables for next week," he said. Lucy smiled back. "Let them wait. The yam will still taste the same." He chuckled. "You've become a bit of a celebrity." She raised an eyebrow. "You think I didn't know that already?" That evening, with the final customer gone and the lights dimmed to a soft glow, Maxwell led Lucy to the rooftop of the restaurant, a quiet space they had designed together. String lights danced above them, and the soft hum of Legos drifted below. Lucy leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sky. The stars, always distant, seemed closer tonight. "I still can't believe how far we've come," she whispered. "I can," Maxwell replied. "You were always meant to rise." He turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "There's something I've wanted to ask you, Lucy." Her heart thudded. Maxwell dropped to one knee. "You weren't just more than a yam seller. You were my miracle. My strength. The one who made me slow down and pay attention to what really matters. Will you marry me?" Lucy stared at him, blinking through the tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Maxwell. 100 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, simple, elegant, and warm. Just like their love. Weeks later, in a quiet hospital room, Lucy held their daughter in her arms. The baby's eyes blinked slowly in the dim light. Outside, the rain had returned, but this time, it felt different, not like sorrow, but like a blessing. Maxwell leaned in and kissed Lucy's forehead. "She's perfect," he said. "I want to name her Ifeoluwa," Lucy said. "It means, God's love. Because that's what brought us here." On the one-year anniversary of More Than Yam, Lucy returned to where it all began. She set up a small yam grill on the exact spot she once stood, under an umbrella, under the rain. But this time, it was a celebration. Locals gathered, many remembering the woman who once stood here selling roasted yam while pregnant. She handed out slices of grilled yam with palm oil and pepper sauce, smiling as people devoured them. When Maxwell arrived, holding baby Ifeoluwa, the crowd parted. He walked up to Lucy, kissed her hand, and whispered. "You turned the rain into fire. And the street into a home." She looked at him, her eyes bright. "It was never just yam," she said. "It was always more." Years later, people would still talk about More Than Yam, not just the food, but the story behind it. A story about a woman who was seen, loved, and believed in. A woman who found her voice in the sizzle of street food and the quiet strength of love. Lucy's daughter would one day run the restaurant. And above the door, the same words would remain. More than yam. Because Lucy's story wasn't just about food. It was about dignity. Resilience. And love that doesn't care where you came from, only where you're going. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more. Thank you.